Alright, my fellow casuals, I hope you're doing well. This one is on Fallout 4, a game that I did like when it first came out, but felt was a drop in quality after Skyrim. I've been on quite a Bethesda run lately. I just replayed Skyrim, did a video. There's been remastered talk about Fallout 3 and New Vegas. The Fallout show is back on, so I had another urge to play this game, and periodically I do get a feeling to return to this game, and I have done so over the years, but I never got back into it the way that I did this time. It is somehow both better and worse than I remember. Not sure how that's possible, but it is. But that's why I made the questions to try and figure these things out, so why don't we get right to them? But real quick, the usual house cleaning. This is my own unedited, uninterrupted gameplay, which I think is the best way to show a game, instead of chopping it up into a highlight reel. You get a better sense of how a game plays, you can see how I play games, and that I am a casual player, not a sweaty palmed elite. And high production values with fancy lights and a shelving rack in the back, with a couple of those little plants on that everybody has. Fast cut editing, that kind of stuff. It just doesn't vibe with a channel for casual gamers like me. We don't have fancy equipment. We don't have high-end PCs. We don't have a lot of time to play games. We don't have cat-like twitch reflexes. We're not 100%ing a game. And most gaming content is not tailored to us, so here we are. On to question number one. What is the best thing about this game? I thought about this a lot because this game has such an addictive quality to it and I couldn't put my finger on it. But I think this game blends gameplay with story flawlessly, and that's the best thing about it. Essentially, the gameplay loop is explore, scavenge, kill, loot, then explore, scavenge, kill, loot, rinse, repeat. And this is true of the Elder Scrolls games. It's true of a lot of games. However, what sets Fallout 4 apart is that it perfectly marries gameplay with story, in the sense of the environmental story being told. You are a survivor in a post-apocalyptic wasteland that would scavenge anything and everything you could to survive, crafting what you need from the items you discover. Crafting and settlements play a major part in this, because finding a mini nuke launcher is just as good as finding a bunch of aluminum cans so you can make a modification for said weapon. Scavenging wood and steel to build housing structures, it all fits into the world and how you would interact with it if it were real. I think this is why this game is so addictive. There's always something to find and craft and explore and loot. It's why I got so hooked this time around. There's not a lot of games that can achieve this. I think the only one that comes to mind is The Last of Us, that perfectly marries that gameplay with that story. Question number two, what is the worst thing about this game? The worst thing about this game is how it was manufactured as a product. All products are manufactured, a toy has to be built, so does a house, and a game has to be designed and built as well. As a product that has been built, this game has been built like shit. That's the only reason I could think of as to why this game hasn't had the multitude of technical issues fixed. They must be hard-coded into how this game was built. The loading times are atrocious. They become only more so with the passage of time. I have a slight fix for that, by the way. I'll get into that in the tips and tricks question, but I can go on about all the other issues. Slow motion staring contests and VATs where attacks don't register or go through. The companions were constantly getting in my way to the point where I had to change my build to get the Lone Wanderer, the solo perk. I mean, it was bad. They were pulling enemies when I was trying to stealth. Shots not registering, getting stuck in the environment. The game wouldn't launch correctly either. I'm going to stop now and just say that for a 10-year-old game, I find the technical state to be, well, just pathetic. Question number three, how does this game look and sound? I don't think this game looks bad, but I also never thought it looked all that great. It is 10 years old, mind you, but that's not it. I like the 1950s aesthetic and even the building architecture having similarities but enough differences to suggest that this is like an alternative timeline where technologically there was more focus on atomic energy and atomic technology. I mean, the best looking aspect of the game I think are some of the creature designs, like the Deathclaw and the Mirelurk. And it's a great moment when you first see the Brotherhood of Steel's massive ship fly over your head with the vertibird circling it, but I was never really impressed by what I expected to see, which was this haunting imagery of a post-apocalyptic world, like fallen skyscrapers or massive car pileups or what have you. There is the occasional dilapidated raised highway that's set against the overcast sky, or from Boston proper, the high rises set against the fog and the clouds, but I don't think they were creative enough with their world design. I'd like to see the settled chaos of a destroyed world and wonder how horrible it would have been to experience that as it was happening. As far as audio quality, Bethesda has never had exceptional voice acting and sound design to the degree that Rockstar has it, whom I feel is the bar for like the highest quality, but it always has been of high quality, very high quality. The menu music is really good in this game. The main theme, the combat music stands out, but other than that, nothing else is remarkable in the soundtrack, and it mostly sounds rather generic. Maybe I throw in the Institute music, which has a science fiction feel to it, and the guy who played Preston Garvey, I recall him not being the greatest voice actor, but in general, the voice acting and the sound design is of high quality, and the music, while there are some highlights, is generally rather generic. Question 4. How does this game control, and is there a preferred method? The controls in this game are fine. I did get used to the Skyrim controls where B on a controller is crouch, and Fallout 4 maps this to the Pip-Boy, but this can be changed in the options. Unfortunately, that causes me to map the melee attack onto clicking in the right stick, which is not unusual for a shooter, but in this game you have to hold that right stick click in to throw a grenade, and that is way more awkward than it sounds. Look, this question always at the end of the day will come down to what you feel more comfortable with. I always feel more comfortable with a controller in my hands, but this game is a bit of a toss-up between the two. This one is more of a shooter, and it's easier to aim with a mouse, but the D-pad hotkeys for a controller are actually better than the hotkeys set up on a keyboard. You have no control over how to set those bindings, unless you mod the game. Bethesda just limits you on a keyboard. I don't know why they do this. They have such a focus on making it accessible for consoles that they limit the PC side of things. It's a weird kind of design decision that they make. Also the rotating of the bobby pin while lockpicking doesn't have the slight touch needed on a controller. It can be frustrating just trying to nudge it. So both have their positives and their negatives, so go with what works for you personally. Question number 5. Which parts of the game were the most fun to play through? Two come to mind. The first one is Libertalia, which is an outdoor raider base on the water, which is basically just a bunch of boats connected by wooden planks. And I got there at night while the Brotherhood of Steel was attacking the place, and it was just an amazing set piece to play through. The second one is the Cambridge Polymer Labs, which has a great backstory to it, where basically these scientists were locked inside of this lab and were being forced to finish a science experiment, but it all went wrong. And you go in there, and the only way that you can get out is if you finish that experiment. It was a great story. It was really fun to play through. And those two parts of the game were the most fun that I could think of at the moment. Question number 6. What is the most impressive and least impressive gameplay system? The most impressive is the settlement system. Not only has it solidified the marriage of gameplay and story, but it also provides hundreds of hours of additional content. Building out each settlement, coming up with ways to make each unique, searching for magazines to unlock more content for them. It really is such a fantastic idea, and I remember Todd Howard talking about it and saying it would fit perfectly, so perfectly, in a game like this, and he was 100% right about that. It so greatly adds to the gameplay story dynamic that I mentioned before. The least impressive is probably the dialogue system. It infamously has been streamlined to the detriment of a lot of Fallout fans. It used to be that what skills you leveled would open up dialogue options and ways to interact with the world, and that's basically been removed, so you have to level only charisma to have more interaction. It's kind of lame, but I never felt that Fallout had great storytelling to begin with. Keep in mind I never played New Vegas, so this wasn't the end of the world to me, but it's still a noticeable streamlining, and it's less interesting as a result. Question 7. Does this game have a good narrative? Look, this is a 10-year-old game, but spoilers ahead. I think the reveal that Father was your son should have been later on in the main storyline, with him revealing more about what the Institute plans were earlier so that you can at least understand more about that faction. I imagine that Bethesda thought that by revealing he was your son early, that you would be more inclined to go along with the Institute regardless of the fact that none of their plans were explained to you. All you basically know is that they steal people to experiment on, their synths will kill people, and that some of them have some level of free will and want to leave the Institute as they find it oppressive. Why do you want to join them? It was done poorly. And it really is a good idea. I like the idea of the secret organization that was abducting people and replacing them with synths. There were shades of Blade Runner and the Terminator here, but the ideas ended up not being executed on in the best way. It seemed to me that they came up with the idea that the primary antagonist is actually your son, and they tried to work backwards from their conclusion, so to speak. Stephen King once said that stories are artifacts that we dig up, suggesting that a good story has such a flow to it that it almost feels like it was a pre-existing thing that has been uncovered. I don't know if having that first twist, or that twist first, and then trying to build a story around it was their approach, but it certainly feels like it, and perhaps they should have tried to let the story flow naturally and see where it went. Also, faction progress doesn't feel earned, similarly to Skyrim. That game's excuse was that they didn't have enough time, so they cut content. In this game, I'm not sure why they decided to replicate it. Skyrim's popularity may have convinced them that this is what players want, but I don't think that most of us do. Have these storylines play out longer and make us feel like we earned the title General, for the Minutemen, for example. They also don't give you a lot of information when it comes to a lot of the quests, and I believe this to be due to the Radiant quest design they implemented in previous games. They have to keep the dialogue and writing broad and vague. It works against its nature as an RPG. Question number 8. How does this game rank as a casual experience? I still don't think that these games are the greatest casual experiences at the default difficulty, especially early on in the game, though it seems like that doesn't matter because they're so popular. VATS is great for people who aren't great at shooters, which is a major contributor to why I think the game is actually good for casuals. I certainly use it, but Fallout 4 I found to be much harder than I remember, though my build was essentially a stealth sniper, so I'm sure that that contributed to my experience. This game can have crazy damage spikes. Molotov cocktail damage radius and time to react are respectively too big and too small. A missile launching raider one-shotting you isn't fun. It comes out of nowhere, and you only learn about it from dying, which is incredibly antiquated game design. This isn't a 1992 Super Nintendo game. Traps, which were under-tuned in Skyrim, are over-tuned here. That being said, depending on your build, you can have a wildly different experience, especially if you focus on endurance and perception, which I'll get into later. You can always adjust the difficulty at any time, and it includes a very easy mode, which never feels good to me to change down the difficulty, but if you feel like you're dying too much, you can at least adjust, then readjust the difficulty. You can also have companions, and you can get perks from them. If they like you enough, you can provide them with gear, and that is always helpful, but I found them to be too intrusive. Eventually you get to a point, and it doesn't take too long, maybe level 20-ish, 25-ish, where you become an unstoppable killing machine, and basically nothing is a threat. So overall, I'd say it's in the middle as far as a casual experience, and I think people can have and did have wildly different initial experiences with Fallout 4. Question 9. Is the amount of content in the game acceptable, and is it worth the purchase price? Bethesda games in general are always good bang for your buck, and that hasn't changed with Fallout 4. There's a lot of content in this game. There's a lot to explore. It's certainly a smaller map, I think, than most people are used to in Bethesda games, but look, there's different builds for different playthroughs. There's different choices to make, to have different narrative experiences, which also add playthroughs. So there's plenty here, and if you want to play it now, at least on PC, you can get it for $20, which is worth it to me. I don't think that $60 for the Anniversary Edition is worth it, though. I mean, you get all of the DLC with that, but it's really just some mod stuff that's just not impressive, and most of the DLC for Fallout 4 is meh, besides maybe Far Harbor and Nuka World, and the game is still embarrassing on a technical level, so buy the stock game, and if you want to purchase the DLC on a case-by-case basis, do that if you want some more. Skip the Anniversary Edition. Question 10. Any helpful tips or tricks for this game? When it comes to dealing with the loading screens, my initial issues with the game not launching correctly forced me to click on the game in the taskbar, and that corrected the choppy frame rate when it launched. But it also fixed whatever is going on with the loading screens whenever you enter into the greater world. If the game seems like it's hanging, at least on PC, during a loading screen, you can click the game's icon in the taskbar, and sometimes, not always, that will get you into the world faster. As far as gameplay tips, there's a million videos out there already, but if you focus on endurance and perception, you become ridiculously overpowered. Most people try to go after either agility or perception, or perception and luck, or agility and luck, for non-automatic damage, sneak damage, critical damage, stuff like that. But if you feel like you might struggle, health, damage resistance, and a high VAT hits chance is the way to go. It's like, I think, the perfect casual build. Question number 11. Does this game need more support, or was it supported well? This game had DLC that was very hit or miss, though this was true of Fallout 3, but that game had 5 meaty DLCs. But I don't want to focus on this too much. I want to focus on the technical state of this game, 10 years on, with the release of an Anniversary Edition, and the fact that it's still a disaster. The Anniversary Edition seemed to make it worse for a lot of people, but I'm playing the stock game, so I don't have enough personal information on that, and the stock game still runs like shit, and for 10 years not to have this stuff fixed is unacceptable. I can only imagine if they had actually fixed a lot of this stuff, that though this game was criticized for its lack of RPG feel, and always will be, I think it would be better received by people coming back to play it if it actually ran how it was supposed to. I mentioned before that the worst thing about this game is how it was built as a product, and if it had been supported over time, it could be in a state where that would no longer be the case. But unfortunately, that is the case. Question 12. At what point do you start to feel fatigued with this game, if at all? I gotta tell you, this game has some serious legs, because even when you've completed all the main end faction quests, the settlements really continue to give you a reason to play. If those don't interest you, then following the completion of most of the main content the game offers, you're most likely going to feel fatigued and that pull towards something else. The settlements and building those out, exploring more of the open world, completing your build or whatever you set out to achieve because you can keep leveling if you wish and acquire every perk, there's a lot here. Finishing a build on a main settlement after completing most of the main content, that's when fatigue could set in. Does it have any gaming pet peeves of yours? I hate it when companions are constantly getting in your way. By the year 2015, to still have this in a game when all of gaming history has taught you that getting blocked constantly, having your freedom of movement restricted by something that's supposed to be helping you, is ridiculous. I literally had to change my build, foregoing companion perks so that dog meat wouldn't get in my way. Turning off collision detection wouldn't have broken the immersion in this game and would have made having a companion better, especially in a game when you're navigating tight spaces due to the destruction and debris around you. Question 14, should this game either be single player or multiplayer or have both? If there is any Bethesda series or Bethesda game that should have at least co-op, it's Fallout 4, with the addition of the settlements to the game. To be able to have someone visit your settlement and build their own area in it, or to help you build yours, even if it had to function where they basically were a tourist in your world, where they could keep their XP and items on them and bring that back to their own, I think that would be widely accepted by most fans. It's something that they should consider for Fallout 5, since they also have developed 76 and that's an MMO, so they have multiplayer game development experience now, though I certainly don't want 5 to be like 76 is. Having a co-op experience that is halfway between a single-player game and an MMO is something I believe they can do, and they could do well. Question 15, what would you want from a prequel, sequel, or remaster? Well, they're clearly working on a sequel, and I wonder where the next setting would be. They've basically kept it to the East Coast, whereas Obsidian did New Vegas out west, and that was a well-received game. So I wonder if Bethesda would go out west, maybe to California with the new California Republic, where the show was taking place. But personally, I'd like to see a different setting, like maybe Florida, something with a similar vibe to Point Lookout, which is Maryland, I know, but I always loved that DLC. Someplace with swamps, beaches, and a Miami-esque city. That would be unique and interesting, and they could get a little weird with it. I'm guessing that after the release of the Fallout 3 remaster, then the New Vegas remaster, that Fallout 4 would be due for a remaster. That would be, I'm guessing, maybe 15 years at the minimum after the game has been originally released. I hope that they fix a lot of the technical issues that plague this game, though given their track record with the Oblivion remaster, they're only going to add more issues. What innovations did this game introduce, refine, or popularize? You know what Fallout 4 did that I really like, and perhaps other games have done it, but I can't remember or I haven't played those games, but that loot window you get when hovering over a corpse or a container is a really convenient little innovation they at least popularized, if not created. Being able to very quickly see what you can loot, take a few things and not have to hit an extra button and get in and out of a menu, it's great. I'd also argue that they popularized having an in-game device that provides you with the menu system. It's very immersive, and they certainly did that with the Pip-Boy. Question 17, what changes would you make to improve this game? Besides completely rebuilding the game so that it doesn't run like a PS1 game where loading times take longer than fucking changing discs, I think they should add back skills to the game and make those shape your experience of interacting with the world better. Here's a wild take too. I think that all crafting should be baseline because it adds so much to that core gameplay loop. Scavenging the wasteland becomes so much more interesting. There's always something to look for and loot. Even if they had to add some barrier, like going to an NPC and pay to craft instead of being able to go to a station yourself, they could maybe add that to the perks to fill the void of removing the crafting perks and just making it baseline. It's just that crafting is so essential, I think. The shooting and combat is pretty good in this game. Not great, but certainly better than 3. But I think they need to understand that part of being a good shooter is allowing the player to have ways to react to what's going on. So either making it easier to react to missiles, like having a locking on sound with a visual cue, having more time to react to a throwable, or having some kind of a movement ability, dodging, sliding, rolling, would have improved combat greatly. Question 18. Is this game the developer's best? I don't think it's Bethesda's best. I still think Skyrim is their best game. You know, I am an Elder Scrolls guy. I'm not a Fallout guy, though I do love these games. But I'm not even sure this is the best Fallout game. I still have to play New Vegas to make that determination. But I certainly have played more Fallout 4 than I have Fallout 3. And I'm just not sure that it's the better game here, though. I've always been more of an Elder Scrolls guy, like I said, but I have to wait for the remasters to make a more well-rounded decision on which is the best Fallout game. Question 19. How does this game compare to others in its genre? Well, I'm not sure this is the best Fallout game. It's certainly a better game than its direct comparisons, like the Outer Worlds games. Also, look, Bethesda, regardless of the myriad of problems this developer has recently, and well, for a while, they make much better games than most of the industry. They just do. Fallout 4, while it was a disappointment in a lot of ways, was still better than a lot of RPGs at the time. That's why they started to get such criticism as of late, and I talked about this in the Skyrim video, that they got away with a lot for so long because their games were so popular that they felt they could do anything they wanted with little to no pushback. And Fallout 4 was their first slip up. Their first game that, while received fairly well, was a noticeable drop in quality, and they really caught some heat for it. And all of their decisions since this game has come out have been, and I'm putting this nicely, mishandled. They've only engendered more mistrust amongst their community of fans. Elder Scrolls 6, while already going to have extremely high expectations, is now being put in an impossible position of having to save this company from being completely abandoned by its most ardent advocates. All of the weight is being put on this game, and I hope that Toddy Boy knows this and could deliver, or else he's not going to be wearing those nice jackets on stage anymore at Bethesda's, as Bethesda's mascot. They're going to keep him in a broom closet in the basement next to that guy from Office Space. Question 20. How was this game received by the broader gaming community? This is one of those games where the critics liked it more than the gamers did, whereas I feel like usually that's reversed. I think after replaying this game, though, despite its technical state and some narrative failings, I'm much more in line with the critics on this one. I think that this is a much better game than I remember, and I got so completely hooked this time around. Just talking about it makes me want to go play it, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more in the main takeaway question. Question 21. What games would you recommend if you enjoyed this game? It's easy to recommend any other Bethesda game or any other Fallout entry, but games that are not a Fallout game or a Bethesda game that cut the closest to this is the Outer Worlds franchise and Atomfall. All of them are on Game Pass. You can check them out there. You're probably already likely aware of them if you're watching this, but personally, I'm actually going to throw Starfield out there. And I'm going to extrapolate on this more in the main takeaway question, but I'm really waiting for the Fallout 3 remaster, the New Vegas remaster, and that one especially because I was never able to finish New Vegas due to a game-breaking bug. But I'd love to go back and replay Fallout 3 because it's been a while since I played it, and I'd love to compare how that game plays to how Fallout 4 plays now. The final question, what is the main theme or takeaway from this game? Coming back to this game and getting so into it this time around really taught me something. Sometimes going back to play something that you didn't connect with the way that you wanted to, either because of high expectations that weren't met, or just where you were in your life, your mentality, your mindset, whatever it is, going back and playing it again at a different point in your life can give you a new perspective on it. While I liked this game initially, I certainly was disappointed, perhaps due to the expectations following Skyrim, and over the years I tried to replay it, but I never sunk so deeply into it as I did this time around. It was really refreshing, and I wonder what other games I could revisit that would maybe connect with me now that didn't when I first played them. And the first one that comes to mind, Starfield. I started playing that game, really enjoyed it initially, then I put down the controller one day and I never thought about it. When I did think about it later on, I just thought about it negatively, like it was not good enough to hold my attention. It certainly had some glaring issues, but I think revisiting that game, now that the dust has settled and seeing how much I enjoyed Fallout 4, perhaps there's a new experience and a new perspective waiting to be discovered. Or maybe it's still shit, but I'm going to find out. And in conclusion here, I like putting a review score on a game. It's a nice, succinct way of presenting your overall impression of a game, and most review sites have way too broad of a score range. I always felt the film review system was easy to understand and apply. 1 star is bad, 2 stars average, 3 stars good, and 4 stars is a masterpiece or must play, with half-star increments to nudge a score in a direction. Fallout 4 is a 3-star game. It's a good game with an insanely addictive gameplay loop that blends that gameplay with its story, a story which is set in an incredibly interesting world. While its narrative threads are underwhelming, and there are those who don't like the streamlined and sanded down role-playing mechanics of previous entries, it's ultimately held back by its almost embarrassingly poor technical state. Whereas if the game, even 10 years on, had that technical state addressed, we'd be looking at a much better received game. That being said, traversing the wasteland is still as fun as ever, its shooting is sharper, and its settlement and crafting system are such profound additions. There's never been a better time to hop back into the Commonwealth and recapture that feeling of a really good Bethesda game, because it's rare these days. And that about wraps it up, my fellow get-gooders, so stay casual, and I'll see you in the next one.